G'day guys, welcome back to your English Aussie and welcome back to another episode of rating your wildcard teams. If you didn't already know, game week 30 is a crucial time to use your wildcard. Check a link to my video above if you want to see why it's so crucial and how this will help you gain rank on your fellow managers over the upcoming weeks. So first off, we're going to kick off with my guy, Mehdi Mezgice. Sorry if I butchered that name, mate. Team name, mad_lads. The team value is 105.2 million. Chips used so far is just the assistant manager chip. And if you want to find him on socials, he's at Mezgice Mehdi on Twitter. My guy from Algeria, big up Riyad Mahrez. He is a French-speaking African talking to an English Aussie. What a culture splash this was. Really interesting team, actually, like quite different to what I've seen before. And I would preface my reviews by saying I do think the optimal strategy is to go out and get as many double game week players as you can, or essentially as many 34 blank game weekers in your wildcard team. Obviously, there will be some exceptions, such as Big Mo Salah and others. So I'll just talk through a couple of interesting standouts in your team. One of them is Jarell Quansah of Liverpool there at the bottom. Despite having no double game weeks for the rest of the season, Liverpool do have some really nice defensive fixtures all the way through to game week 33, Everton, Fulham, West Ham and Leicester. I then expect you to be free hitting in game week 34 and then probably from 35 through to 38. He can just be used as bench fodder. I think what you should be doing is using your bench boost before that, either 31, 32 or 33. Probably ideally 33 and picking as many doublers as you can. The other thing that I notice in your team is you do have 2 Newcastle and 2 Crystal Palace players in there. I do think given both these teams have one more game than all the other teams in the Premier League, they're both sitting on 28 games played. Every other team has played 29. It is worth having the extra player for these guys, especially for that double game week 32. And I would say specifically Newcastle, as you know that they're not going to blank later in the season. 2 options that, or at least one option that I'm not particularly fond of, is probably Jose Sarr of Wolves. Areola as well on the bench, but I guess West Ham could potentially double in game week 33, depending on how the FA Cup fixtures fall. Instead of Sarr, as I don't really like the Wolves defence at the moment, you could potentially look at Nick Pope of Newcastle. That allows you to get your 3rd Newcastle player into the team. And I think Pope rotates quite nicely with Areola through to the end of the season. And he, of course, has that double in 32 with Manchester United and Crystal Palace, which is a nice sort of defensive couple of fixtures, hopefully, for Newcastle. If you do need the money to be able to make that upgrade from Jose Sarr, I think the options that you have from your team are probably either going to be a Kluivert or a Bruno Fernandes to downgrade. I know probably Fernandes is someone that you'd want in your team. If you've put him in there, he's obviously someone that you'll want longer term. But potentially if Bournemouth don't manage to beat Manchester City in the FA Cup, then neither Bournemouth or Manchester United will be doubling in the season. So therefore, potentially you might want to move these guys. My suggestions for a change would be maybe a Minte or a Langa, depending on who win between Brighton and Nottingham Forest, or potentially even a Jared Bowen if you're downgrading Bruno Fernandes. Of course, if you do watch my live streams, you know there is another West Ham player who I'm a big fan of, but I don't want to give poor advice on videos when people haven't watched. So check out my live stream for that interesting one. I do really like that double of the Manchester City attack. I think that's really looking to exploit that Leicester home fixture. I think that's a really interesting way to go. Outside of that, I think the rest of the team looks nice. You're obviously going to hope that Crystal Palace win against Fulham, able to double, and then that gives Timber the double game week as well for Arsenal. So for me, yeah, overall a nice wildcard team. Hopefully a couple of pointers from me for you to help you. Moving on to our next team on here, and that is Emard Bray. Team name RonaldoZ the GOAT. Team value 103.7 million. Chips used so far, free hit and assistant manager. And if you want to catch him on socials, he is at Ronaldo BETTR7 on Twitter. He is also one of my OG subscribers, also known as GamerFox on YouTube. This is actually a really interesting team and one quite a few people have asked me about. People that are planning to wildcard but have already used their free hit. And I think in this situation, I would suggest slightly different team to how I would elsewise. And that's why I've been asking you guys for your team IDs, etc. So if you do want to take part, I'm probably going to do one more version of this video. Please remember, post your socials down below in the comments. And then screenshot me your wildcard team and your team ID on one of my socials, which you'll see going through the screens above. And then I'll do my best to get you into the next version of these videos. Team ID is really important because it allows me to see what chips you've used so far this season. So in this case for Emad, I would recommend that you've got to actually be a little bit careful to not pick too many people who are blanking in game week 34, because of course you've got to manage that game week without being able to use the free hit. Now, for people that have already used your free hit, the one thing that is absolutely crucial to your team, and I think everybody should have, is to make sure that you have 3 Newcastle players in that team. Newcastle are the only team that are going to play 10 matches for the rest of the season, and they're definitely not going to blank in game week 34. Obviously, if Crystal Palace lose in the FA Cup, then 3 Crystal Palace players is almost as much of a must as Newcastle. They do both have some great fixtures coming up as well. So not only is it the double game weeks, but the fixtures are really nice over the next few weeks in the season. I think at least 2, including Henderson. The main reason Henderson is a key pick for Crystal Palace is you can obviously bench him in game week 34 if he does blank. So even if Palace do go through in the FA Cup and they manage to beat Fulham, if your other goalkeeper is someone that isn't a game week 34 blanker, and right here you've got Jordan Pickford, which works, you can obviously play that goalkeeper, bench Henderson, and then still have space for 3 other potential doublers in 33 that you can shift to your bench. So I think Henderson's a really good pick for this team. Really crucial that you keep him in there. Munoz and Mateta for Palace are perfect. They're probably the 2 key players from my eyes. Maybe Ismail Assar in there as well. Isak and Dan Burn, wonderful for Newcastle. I would probably be looking to get one more Newcastle player in. I think that pick would most likely be in the midfield. And it would probably be either a Bruno Guimaraes or a Jacob Murphy for a Kluivert or an Elanga. Obviously, take a look at who gets through in the FA Cup to make that decision. I would just put out there, I thought Bruno, one of the previous wildcard teams I've seen, was a really interesting choice. He has actually scored more FPL points than Jacob Murphy so far this season. Appreciate he's played more minutes, but the way that he presses so high in that Newcastle team, and he really leads off the press, sometimes wins back the ball in some super attacking positions, and he's also involved creatively in a lot of the Newcastle moves, is just so important to that team, and he could be a nice little differential pick in your wildcard side. Another option for me is potentially to bring in Nick Pope for Pickford. That's a way to get your sort of 3rd Newcastle player into your team. Nick Pope obviously doesn't blank in game week 34, so you can bench Henderson for that blank game week and still have a playing player for game week 34, as well as getting that double Newcastle player in game week 32. If Nottingham Forest do win in the FA Cup, for this team I really would recommend that you don't pick any of their players. I think the likelihood is that they will be blanking in 34, and then potentially the double is more likely to be in a 36. maybe a 32, but possibly a 36. And if it does go into 36, I think there's no point having their players for this sort of run towards your blank game week in 34. You can perhaps start transferring them in 35, 36 ahead of that sort of double game week. So yeah, the rest of the team looks really nice. I think I'd recommend approximately 5 to 6 double game week 33 players in your wildcard draft, including Henderson in goal. You can bench 3 of those. You can bench Henderson, and then the other 1 or 2 players you can make your 2 transfers, transfer them out in game week 34 for players that are playing. And then in 35, 36, you can use your transfers to move towards potentially a Nottingham Forest players if they are doubling in game week 36. So I think the rest of this team looks okay, but I think the real considerations are not overpicking the double game weekers. I would say 5 to 6 double game weekers for 33. Make sure you have Henderson in there. Make sure you have 3 Newcastle players in there. I actually think Nick Pope could be the easy option here. You just move Pickford to a Nick Pope as well. Or otherwise, you could just move a Clivert or a Langer to a Murphy or Bruno. So yeah, 3 Palace, 3 Newcastle, and the 3 Palace must include Henderson. And then yeah, 5 to 6 double game weekers. And I think that for anybody that does have a free hit, has used the free hit already and is looking to wildcard, I think that's got to be the template for your team going forwards. So yeah, thanks a lot, Ahmed. I really appreciate that, Matt. Thanks for always commenting on the YouTube videos, liking the videos, being in the live streams. Really appreciate you. And moving on to our next team, and that is Fundles, team value of 103.8 million. Chip's used so far, the assistant manager Chip, and if you want to check him out on socials, he does have Fundles01 on YouTube. I think this team, to be honest, is probably one of the best wildcard teams I've seen. I honestly didn't have too many comments when I saw it. I think the main thing that I would say is obviously either Nottingham Forest or West Ham are going to be doubling and are going to blank in 34. Whoever is the winner out of the Nottingham Forest versus Brighton game, the Brighton West Ham would be the double, or otherwise Nottingham Forest would double with Brentford. So I think here you can see you've got Bowen, and then you've also got Areola, and then you've got Sells and Nico Williams. So my suggestion for this team would be, depending on which team obviously progresses, pick the teams that are going to double. So either you lose Bowen and Areola, potentially for a Fernandez, maybe if you can afford him, if Bournemouth obviously beat Man City and Bournemouth and United double, or otherwise the Elanga of Nottingham Forest and maybe a Kepa in goal instead of Areola. Or if you lose Sells and Williams, if Nottingham Forest lose to Brighton, then maybe you have perhaps Timber from Arsenal in defence, or you can go Aaron Wan-Bissaka at West Ham, or even Van Hecke from Brighton. And then in goal, you've got the options of Kepa, you've got Verbruggen, and you can sort of move towards those other doublers depending on who the winners are. But yeah, I think overall this is a really nice team. I think what I would follow is most likely wildcard again 30. Look to use your bench boost as soon as you can. So ideally 33 if you can get a lot of doublers in there. Free hit yourself in 34. And given that you haven't used a triple captainship yet, I'd probably be looking to use it in the double in 32 on Alexander Isak. But obviously you can wait and see what the other doubles come out as. Potentially you might want to use it on Haaland in 33, or if they double in 36, maybe that becomes a little bit more appealing with Southampton as well as Aston Villa. So yeah, I think overall great team. Not too many comments. This is sort of a pretty good template before the FA Cup results come out. Obviously, things might change at that stage. Once again, thanks everybody that filled in these teams. If you do want to get involved in the next video, please follow the instructions that I gave out. I'll also post below in the comments. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Have a great week. This has been your English Aussie, and I'll catch you guys later.